Our next speaker is Christia Mercer from Columbia University. Her talk is entitled Leibniz's Theodicy and the Epistemological Problem of Evil.
I thought that instead of making you all look down and read my paper, I'd make you look up and read my paper. So there's some nice shift in that. But also, as some of you know, my first degree was in art history, so I'm always inclined to show nice pictures when I have a chance. So, and why not do it when we're talking about evil and God and Leibniz? I also will tell you that because my paper was a bit too long just to read, I've kind of stripped away a couple of the strands in the paper. They're not relevant to the comment, the bits that I took out. And again, I wasn't too worried about that because you have the paper with you. So let's begin. Though I can't see this on the screen suddenly. Oh, here we go. All right. So being a somewhat dutiful student, I suppose, I decided to follow one of the request of the conference description, which is to fit the Theodicy and its views into the larger intellectual landscape of the period, standing as it does at a crucial crossroads, the waning of the post-Reformation, the maturing of the scientific revolution, and so on. And I actually really do think that if we look at the Theodicy in the context of a history of the very brief, kind of difficult period of the conflict between the Reformation theologians and the post-Reformation theologians, we can see aspects of it, I think, more clearly than we otherwise would. So the context here that I want to talk about is, I think, I'll read this. The subtlety and importance of the text is best seen in putting it, that is the Theodicy, in the broader philosophical and historical context that we historians, a broader one than we usually put it in. So the philosophical problem that concerns me is both, I think, a striking feature of the Theodicy, and one that, as far as I know, and this erudite audience will surely tell me if I've missed something here, has not been noted, namely what I'm inclined to call Leibniz's epistemological optimism. So the strategy for my talk today, it goes like this. I'm going to note some puzzling questions that the Theodicy raises about some of Leibniz's epistemological goals. And again, in the written version of the paper, I go into more details. I'll just be very quick about that today here. I want to contextualize these questions by introducing you to what I call the ultimate epistemological problem. And I want to point out some of the prominent historical solutions to the problem. Again, this is an attempt to contextualize the Theodicy. And then I want to turn somewhat briefly to some works that are related to the Theodicy in order to explicate Leibniz's solution to the ultimate epistemological problem. And finally, very briefly again, to the Theodicy itself. Okay, so the Theodicy and epistemological optimism. There appears to be a tension in the very first few lines, really, paragraphs of the Theodicy's preface. On the one hand, Leibniz seems pessimistic about the capacity of humans to grasp the divine light and thereby acquire the virtue that is supposed to follow from it. He writes things like they failed to acquire this ultimate knowledge due to human weakness. And again, you can look at some more passages on my paper, page 4. On the other hand, however, he seems very optimistic, suggesting that humans are naturally poised to discover this light and virtue. All they have to do, whether Jew, Muslim, Christian, or other, is avoid the obscuring opinions of men and discern the beautiful conceptions related to the greatness and goodness of God. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. I may have to start reading up here because there's something kind of funny about the screen. I'll see how this goes. Or Sam may have to come up and help me here. So Leibniz says in the preface that although Christianity is the purest and most enlightened religion and the one founded by a divine personage, the divine light is available to everyone, regardless of religion. The epistemological optimism here consist in the assumption that humans are capable of glimpsing the divine light, regardless of their religious perspective. Now, not only does the preface go on to suggest that Leibniz is epistemologically optimistic, but of course aspects of the rest of the work implies both that Leibniz himself has a firm grasp of the way the world is, and that he intends to convince others of his account. In short, that this is the best of all possible worlds. In short, a survey of the Theodicy leaves us with some puzzling questions about Leibniz's underlying epistemology. Is it easy to acquire this ultimate knowledge or not? Is it easy to be moved by the beauty of these conceptions or not? What does it mean to say that these conceptions are beautiful? In what sense, in what does this beauty consist? In the end, what are we to think about the ease of acquiring this most important ultimate knowledge? Now, in order to understand Leibniz's epistemological optimism and its role in theodicy, we have to set things up. The setup has three parts. A very brief, in fact, account of the metaphysical reasons for being epistemologically optimistic, a summary of the ultimate epistemological problem, a romp through the ultimate epistemological problem in the political, philosophical, and religious context of early modern Germany in particular. And once I've done that, I'll return to the Theodicy and related texts to resolve the puzzle about Leibniz's epistemological optimism. So the metaphysical setup can be done very quickly. I've written on this sort of ad nauseum almost, to remind you, for many thinkers in the history of philosophy, there is an ultimately good source of the world that is in the world and in every creature. One of the prime biblical texts that people like to use, and we find this everywhere, often misread in fact, is Paul. God is that of whom all things are, through whom all things are, in whom all things are. So God is in us and in the world. The divine nature is there to be glimpsed, loved, and for some philosophers, experienced. All right, now here's a really nice Baroque example of the experiencing of God. This is Bernini's The Ecstasy of St. Teresa, which is actually one of my favorite works of the period. Now talk about experiencing God, right? So again, I won't go into the details, we don't have time, but an angel, this is an account in stone of this moment when Teresa has been visited by an angel who stabs her in the heart several times. She experiences first suffering and then the love of God. Where's Nick Jaw? This is not a case of thinking of England, by the way. And Freud, in fact, made a big fuss about this painting. I'd be happy to talk about it in the question period, though I doubt you'll want to. Okay, the problem. But this intimate relation between God and the world in general, and between God and humans in particular, generates what I consider to be a striking philosophical problem. And it's not one, as far as I can tell, that has been properly noted. The problem goes like this. The divine nature is diffused, expressed, or emanated, or whatever relation suits you, throughout the world. And moreover, the same nature is in us, who are the divine products, expressions, or modes of God. Given the closeness of this relationship, it would seem to follow that those creatures capable of knowledge of God, say creatures like us human beings, would have intimate knowledge of the divinity. After all, given that the divinity is everywhere in nature, and many of the philosophers who have this metaphysical setup maintain, constitutes our nature, it would seem to follow that we would have lots of knowledge of it. To make the point another way, the close metaphysical relation between God and creatures would seem to imply a close epistemological relation. But of course, this is not the case. Not only do we not have an intimate knowledge of God, we don't have any really, at least many of us, don't have any direct knowledge of God at all. In fact, it seems very, very difficult to acquire such knowledge. The problem. My inclination is to see this problem as a version of the problem of evil. The problem faces anyone who assumes that the divine nature is in the world and in all its parts. The severity of the problem seems to increase the more fully the divine nature is in the world and in us. That is, the more the divine nature is supposed to be in things, the easier it should be to know it. How can God be so fully there and yet not be more apparent? Given that the divine nature is so difficult to know, it would seem to follow that something has gone wrong. But of course, with God, things are not supposed to go wrong. So the apparent paradox is, God is everywhere, but nowhere to be found. Nor is this problem just academic, so to speak. According to many of the philosophers who maintain the close metaphysical relation between God and us, the goodness of our souls depends on glimpsing God. That is, it's not just that it would be nice to see God, say, the way it would be nice to see Barack Obama succeed or social justice prevail, or, by the way, the Yankees win the World Series again. Rather, for many thinkers who insist that God and the world are so intimately related, they also insist that we must glimpse God in order to be virtuous or righteous or good. For them, one cannot live a proper life without glimpsing the divine nature. Moreover, for some people, this unrequited desire to know the divine creates a kind of suffering. I know or strongly believe that the divine nature is there to be glimpsed, but I cannot myself see it. Is there a solution to the problem, a way to avoid the paradox? Let's be clear about what a solution would look like. For those philosophers who maintain that God is thoroughly in the world and who want to solve or circumvent the ultimate epistemological problem, they will have to explain precisely what it is about humans that prevents them from immediately finding God. They will have to answer, I say, 3 questions. First, what prevents people from more or less glimpsing the divine nature? 2, what will allow them to get better at it? 3, is it ever easy to do so, and if so, how? The Theodicy offers, I think, a solution to the ultimate epistemological problem. Within the context of this philosophical problem, so this is the philosophical context I've been setting up, we can better appreciate the power of the work. But to grasp the subtlety and originality of Leibniz's solution, we need also, I think, to place his work in its broader historical scope. So let's do that now. Epistemological pessimism and original sin. The Christian doctrine of original sin offers a brilliant solution to the problem and neatly answers our questions. It's easy to forget how radical this position is. Let me remind you. Because of original sin, in brief, because of our tainted natures, we turn away from God and seek the truth by mistaken means. Because of original sin, the only way to glimpse God within the world is through grace, i.e., with direct divine help. Either we are utterly lost to sinfulness and foolishness, or God aids us in recognizing the divinity and, however pathetically, following the right course. There's some quotations relevant to this on pages 7 and 8. So for Paul and Augustine, I talk about Paul and Augustine a bit in the written version of the paper, or the printed, I should say, version of the paper. God is there to be discovered. It ought to be easy to find God, but it is not. Because of the sinful nature we inherit from Adam and Eve, we rarely glimpse the divinity in the world. So, in answer to our first question, it is our proper punishment for original sin that prevents us from glimpsing the divine nature. As he makes the point in the Confessions, Augustine writes, "But from the disappointment I suffered, I perceived that the darknesses of my soul would not allow me to contemplate these sublimities." Is there any way out of this epistemological trap? Or, as Augustine himself poses the question, what will wretched man do? In answer to our second question, he explains that we will be delivered from this state only through the grace of Jesus Christ. Thus, human nature by itself is not capable of finding God. It will do so only with direct divine help. In answer to our third question, is it ever easy? The short answer for Augustine is a resounding no way. But with the help of God, some of us can nonetheless struggle to remain in contact with the divinity and live something like a proper life. As I remind you of Book 10 of the Confessions, after he's converted, after he's found God, he's still struggling in all kinds of ways to maintain a sense of God. However morose the doctrine of original sin might make us, it offers a tidy solution to the ultimate epistemological problem. Although God is metaphysically very close to human beings, they cannot grasp the divinity due to their fallen nature. Grace is necessary for any proper epistemological relation to God. Luther's trouble, or mitigated epistemological optimism in Lutheran Germany. Famously, at the Leipzig Disputation in 1519, Luther denied the authority of the Church. For our purposes, what is particularly important is that, in doing so, he